Chapter 11 The Weakest Class Monitor. By the time the sweat-drenched Huo Yua had finished his 10th lap, the person in first place, Wang Dong, had already lapped him 3 times. The other students had already lapped him at least 1 time. Many people had even cast disdainful gazes at him. After all, they all knew that Huo Yua definitely had the weakest cultivation amongst them. However, the running speed of the students in front had already started to slow down. As time passed, the effects of the chainmail started to become more obvious. Even Wang Dong had a face full of sweat. The few male students who'd followed Wang Dong from the start had started to fall behind. Some had even been overtaken by the students behind them. Drops of sweat seeped into the running track. After around an hour had passed, a female student who had a weaker body collapsed to the ground. She struggled to get up, but she couldn't do anything. Wang Dong happened to be running next to her when this happened. He helped her up and sent her an inquiring gaze. However, that female student shook her head and sat down on the plaza, unwilling to get back up. She didn't even have the energy to speak. With the first, the second was bound to happen. Perhaps it was because they had the cushion of Huo Yua, who was dead last. Although the students persevered, in the end, their willpower didn't seem to be too strong. The burden of carrying the heavy chainmail whilst running was truly enormous. This was especially true since everyone had started running at full speed, which had quickly depleted their soul force. On the other hand, withstanding the weight of the chainmail with their bodies alone was truly something strenuous at their age. When 2 hours had passed, half of the students had collapsed to the ground. From the beginning to the end, Zhou Yi had stood there with an expressionless face. She hadn't urged them to continue either. Huo Yua was also reaching his limit. Although he decided to run with a constant speed, which meant that the drain on his physical strength was the lowest, his soul force was still the weakest amongst the people present, and his physical strength wasn't that much different either. Being able to persevere until now was already quite difficult for him. If you looked at it from the viewpoint of the number of laps that he completed, he was no longer the last, due to the fact that he'd managed to persevere for a longer time than some. When everything in front of him started to turn black, he suddenly felt that there seemed to be a lump of fire within his stomach that was burning. He was extremely parched, and the stickiness he felt from the sweat all over his body was hard to bear. As the heavy chainmail ground against his skin through his school uniform, bursts of scorching pain passed unceasingly through his body. Not good, I can't hold on any longer. A voice continuously echoed out in Huo Yua's mind. He activated his soul force and poured it into his spirit eyes with much difficulty. A refreshing feeling spread out from his spirit eyes, causing him to sober up a little. This won't do. I can't collapse like this. I will definitely persevere. As he looked at the many students running in front of him, he thought about the increase in cultivation speed that he'd experienced that afternoon after the extremely large drain to his soul force. Huo Yua suddenly bit his tongue, rousing himself to continue running. At this moment, he suddenly felt a comfortable, warm feeling spread out from his lower abdomen. Although his soul force had already almost been exhausted, the warm feeling flowed slowly through his limbs and bones, causing his aching muscles to feel slightly alleviated. This is the power of the mysterious heaven technique. Huo Yua quickly recognized the source of the warm current. After cultivating the mysterious heaven technique, it would gather in his lower abdomen at the very end. Although the time he'd spent cultivating the mysterious heaven technique so far was still short, he still had a foundation of soul force. After all, after converting his previous soul force into the mysterious heaven techniques, he could be considered to have completed the first layer of the mysterious heaven technique. Both his eldest senior brother and the Sky Dream Iceworm had said that the mysterious heaven technique was very suitable for him, since it could nourish his passageways. Was it finally displaying its effects? As he pondered the matter, Huo Yua's consciousness very naturally followed the passageways of the mysterious heaven technique, and felt it out for a moment. He didn't sense any obstructions, and the warm feeling within his lower abdomen wandered around his passageways, following his consciousness. Huo Yua saw that it was a weak trace of the mysterious heaven technique soul force. Only, it would slowly spread into his passageways as it traveled, which was also the reason behind the warm feeling. The thing that astonished him even more was that his passageways were actually absorbing these strands of soul force at an extremely rapid pace. This was also the source of the comfortable feeling he'd felt earlier, which had in turn relieved his weariness. Huo Yua's natural physique wasn't that good, but he was still quite smart. The fact that the mysterious heaven technique could be absorbed by him when his body reached its limit signified that he could also circulate it while moving, not just when he was meditating. The circulation of the mysterious heaven technique under these circumstances was slightly different than when he was normally cultivating. The speed at which his soul force increased in strength wasn't high, but its integration with his body was much more intimate. With this discovery, Huo Yua hurriedly concentrated while simultaneously slowing his steps. He quietly started to circulate the mysterious heaven technique. The Tang sect's mysterious heaven technique had been brought over from another world by the first generation Tang sect master, Tang Clan. From a certain standpoint, it wasn't a technique that belonged to the Douluo continent, but was definitely a top-notch technique. It had extremely large benefits towards the nourishment of one's body. Due to an accident, Huo Yua had actually created a method of circulating the mysterious heaven technique without entering a state of meditation. When it was circulated like this, the main effect of the mysterious heaven technique would be to nourish one's body by using soul force to nourish the passageways. Due to the progressive recovery that resulted from the circulation process of the mysterious heaven technique, a miraculous cyclical state had formed within his body. This could be considered cultivation while moving. Huo Yua didn't know it, but even the first generation sect master of the Tang sect, Tang Clan, hadn't managed to achieve this. The reason behind this was simply because he had richly endowed advantages. Huo Yua's cultivation, on the other hand, was still weak, which was the reason why his body was able to reach such a state, where it was at its limit. Furthermore, both his spiritual energy being very strong, combined with his possession of a spiritual type martial soul, made it so that he could sense and manipulate the miraculous energy. The Tang sect had birthed many experts, but none of them had possessed the conditions that the current Huo Yua had. After they became strong, they wouldn't easily reach their limits, and they wouldn't carefully sense the warm feeling that appeared in their dungeons. It could be said that an evolution of the mysterious heaven technique had appeared in Huo Yua's body. With the harmonization of this warm feeling, Huo Yua's body, which had originally reached its limit, was relieved of its exhaustion by a certain amount. Not only did this strengthen his willpower, it also made him pour more of his spiritual energy into guiding this warm feeling. The warm feeling circulated around his body, following the circulation path of the mysterious heaven technique. When it completed an entire cycle, the strand would be almost fully drained. However, it was also at the moment that the cycle was completed that the warm feeling would be slightly strengthened once again, and would continue to move forward. Huo Yua's body was getting more and more exhausted, but he was getting more and more excited. The mysterious heaven technique's nourishment of his passageways under his current state was exactly what he needed the most right now. His thin passageways, which he previously needed extreme care to handle, became more elastic under the nourishment of the warm feeling, and even widened slightly. The unprecedented lack of obstruction within the areas that the warm feeling passed through told Huo Yua that he was doing the right thing. The number of students who collapsed within Shrek Plaza was gradually increasing. Even the students who'd been running at the very front were starting to gradually be unable to persevere. The sounds of chainmail smashing into the ground occasionally echoed out from time to time. When Wang Dong lapped Huo Yua once again, every step he took was taken with great difficulty. However, to his astonishment, he saw that Huo Yua's eyes were lightly shut. They were only open enough to expose a small crack that faintly exuded a golden light. His steps were taken very slowly compared to Wang Dong's, but he was still advancing steadily. Many of the students who had higher cultivation levels than him had already collapsed, but he was still bitterly persevering. He even left a trail of sweat with every step he took. If you can't do it, don't force yourself. Wang Dong spoke in a low voice before continuing onwards. The number of laps that he'd run so far exceeded everyone else by a large margin. However, his body was reaching its limit. Another hour passed, with the time left until the bell rang getting closer and closer. There were only 9 students left that were still running around Shrek Plaza. However, the person who'd been considered the bottom cushion from the start, Huo Yua, was one of them. Zhou Yi had been paying attention to Huo Yua the entire time. She'd already been astonished when only 2 hours had passed. Based on Huo Yua's physical strength and soul force, he should have reached his limit at 2 hours, no matter what the circumstances. However, he'd still managed to persevere. Although running at a constant speed did give some small benefits, his cultivation and physical condition were both right there. Could a person's willpower really be strong to this extent? Furthermore, he was still so young. Put on. 2 more students collapsed, and when they did, they created a domino effect. A few students collapsed in succession following the duo, one of them just happening to bump into Wang Dong, who was next to him. Wang Dong stumbled, his already aching legs unable to persist any longer. As he fell down, his thoughts about persevering also collapsed. However, he'd run the greatest number of laps within the class. There was no one left who could exceed the number of laps that he'd run. There were still 3 people that were still running, one of which was Huo Yuao. After 5 minutes, the other 2 students also collapsed. The last person still running was actually Huo Yuao, the weakest person of class 1. Although his steps were weak, and his running speed wasn't that quick, he'd still managed to persevere, even when everyone else had collapsed. This caused astonishment to appear on many students' faces when they looked at him. It was true that Huo Yuao had already reached his limit, and it was also true that the warm feeling caused by the mysterious heaven technique could nourish his body and relieve his weariness to a certain extent. However, in the end, it didn't make him stronger. He'd reached his limit again and again, but had clenched his teeth and endured it every single time. Huo Yuao understood that he was the weakest amongst the students of 1, so he had to commit 200%, or even 300% of their hard work if he wanted to remain at Shrek Academy. And at this moment, tempering his body by reaching his limits could both help widen his passageways and increase his soul force. No matter what, he did his best to persist for every single moment. Persevere, persevere. Huo Yuao inwardly shouted to himself non-stop. At that moment, he didn't even any soul force left that he could pour into his spirit eyes to stimulate himself and sober up his mind. Gradually, he himself began to sound out the chant that he was using to support himself. Mother, mother. This was all for the sake of his mother's last wishes, for the sake of being able to retrieve his mother's remains from that place one day, for the sake of washing away his mother's humiliation and avenging her. No matter what, he had to persevere. Thud, thud. Huo Yuao's footsteps were extremely heavy. His legs and body were trembling uncontrollably. However, he didn't fall down. Under such difficult conditions, he still repeated the machine-like motions of raising his leg, putting it down, raising it back up, and putting it back down once again. The disdainful look that the students, who'd now fallen, had been looking at him with gradually disappeared. The power that a role model provided was mighty. They started to pull themselves back up, one by one, before blankly staring at Huo Yuao's figure as he persevered. After being stunned for a brief moment, Wang Dong was the first to continue running after Huo Yuao. However, he didn't overtake him this time around. With Wang Dong leading, a second, and then a third person gradually began to start following him. Gradually, all of the students from class 1 clenched their teeth and raised their legs, which were already stiff to the point that they felt dead, to continue running. Zhou Yu was moved. Of all the time she'd been teaching, it was extremely rare that she'd be moved by the performances of her students. However, this time, she'd truly been moved. This was because of Huo Yuao, and in turn was also because of the 90 students who'd climbed back up to follow him. This was no longer a simple exercise that could temper their bodies. This was a tempering of their minds. Zhou Yu could visibly see their determination within their exhausted facial expressions. The results of this class were far, far greater than what she'd imagined. Ding ring ring. The bell that signaled the end of the class finally rang. Huala, huala. It was truly the collapse of a row of dominoes this time. The ear-piercing bell instantly caused a large number of people to collapse. The sounds of collision caused by their chainmail and the ground caused a series of sounds to echo out and knocked a cloud of dust into the air. Huo Yuao, who'd been at the very front, finally collapsed. The bell caused him to finally let go of all of the stubbornness and perseverance within his heart. However, he didn't fall directly to the ground. As he fell, Wang Dong, who was right behind him, caught him by his chainmail. As soon as he did, the two of them rolled to the ground together. The two simultaneously gasped for air together. As he looked towards the sky, Huo Yuao's vision turned dark for a period of time. However, the passageways within his body had become comfortably warm and felt indescribably comfortable. The soul force within his body had been exhausted, and his physical strength had already been overdrawn way before that. And yet, his passageways still made him feel very comfortable. He had the premonition that, in all aspects, his cultivation would have a large improvement after this. Wang Dong lay beside Huo Yuao. Both his cultivation and the condition of his body were much stronger than Huo Yuao's, so even though he was extremely exhausted, he wasn't like Huo Yuao, who couldn't budge at all. I really don't know what power made it so that you could endure all the way until now. You're a soul master with only a 10-year soul ring, but you were able to persevere longer than a soul grandmaster like me. You're truly a freak. Huo Yuao chuckled twice. He didn't even have the energy to speak anymore. Zhou Yu slowly took a deep breath, then beckoned towards the distance. A white-clothed male arrived as if he was floating on air. He arrived by Zhou Yu's side with what seemed to be a few light steps. After nodding towards her, he turned towards the students. His dazzling soul rings rose up from his feet one by one. There were 2 yellow ones, 2 purple ones, and 3 black ones. He actually had 7 soul rings. Soul Sage. This was actually a Soul Sage ranked expert, who was above the 70th rank. He was already approaching the peak of Soul Masters. Furthermore, he only looked to be around 30 years old. Only, the vicissitudes visible within his eyes didn't match his youthful outer appearance. He raised his hands, and a gentle shade of green, a leaf, suddenly began to grow from his palms. His 7th soul ring flashed brightly as it revolved around him, but the students were only able to see his body flash once before it unexpectedly disappeared. The green leaf grew, wildly, and in the blink of an eye, the leaf unexpectedly turned into an enormous tree that was extremely tall. A cool breeze seemed to blow past them. Then, dark green leaves began to fly out from the enormous canopy of the enormous tree. Exactly 91 leaves landed lightly on the bodies of the students from class 1. Not one more, and not one less. Every single present felt an incomparably refreshing feeling. The refreshing feeling instantly spread throughout their bodies, and no matter whether it was their aching muscles or the wounds that had been incurred by the chainmail grating against their skin, they were all recovering at an astonishing speed. Furthermore, their physical strength was gradually recovering a drop at a time. Only their soul force was completely empty. It wasn't left completely unaffected by the dark green leaf. Wang Dong had the highest cultivation amongst everyone present, and was also the first person to recover. He flipped over and sat up before looking at the extremely tall tree with a burning gaze. He took a deep breath of the cool air. This is one of the pinnacle existences amongst plant-type martial souls, the Tree of Life. It's a 70th ranked martial soul with a soul avatar. Teacher Zhou actually found a plant-type soul master above the 70th rank to heal us and help us recover. The dark green light shrouded the area. After releasing 91 tree leaves, the enormous tree rapidly shrunk and transformed back into the white-clothed male in the blink of an eye. Afterwards, he nodded at Zhou Yi, who bowed respectfully towards him. That male left in the same way he'd arrived, like a gust of wind. From the start to end, he hadn't said a word to Zhou Yi at all. The students crawled up one after another. Although they were still exhausted, they felt an indescribable pleasure from their bodies breaking through their limits. Huo Yuao had also recovered from his half-dazed state. After receiving nourishment from that godly soul skill, a refreshing feeling washed over his muscles and caused their exhaustion to disappear without a trace. Furthermore, the passageways within his body were still immersed in the comfortably warm feeling that the mysterious heaven technique had created. It was almost as if he was feeling the comfortableness provided by both cold and hot at the same time. He'd never felt such a comfortable feeling in his life before. He supported himself as he crawled back up. His entire body was covered in sweat, but his spirit eyes became increasingly bright. He subconsciously activated his soul force and circulated it according to the mysterious heaven technique. He found that he could actually still do it, and that the intangible changes within his body had nourished his passageways. Furthermore, since it wasn't being consumed anymore, there was still that little bit of the mysterious heaven technique's internal energy left over that was able to return back to his dantian and complete a full cycle before it circulated again. Zhou Yi gazed at all the students who were slowly crawling up and indifferently said, "I have to say, you all have given me an answer that astonished me quite a bit. Today, nobody will be eliminated." Once she said this, the students couldn't help but immediately let out a cheer, especially the few who'd run the least number of laps, who felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their minds. Zhou Yi then proceeded to say, "You all need to thank Huo Yuao. Originally, I was prepared to give you all a punishment. The task that I gave you all was for you to run until the bell rang, and then we'd count the number of laps each of you ran. However, other than Huo Yuao, none of you managed to run from the start to the end. However, since you were able to actually develop a sense of competition because of him, you don't have to have a punishment. Wang Dong, step forward. Teacher." Wang Dong took a step forward. Zhou Yi indifferently said, as the class monitor of class 1, you only cared about yourself. You didn't set a good example for the others. From now on, you're stripped of your position of class monitor, which will be taken over by Huo Yuao. Until the next physical class, Huo Yuao will be the class monitor of class 1. If anyone wants to challenge him, you're in charge of accepting them. When he heard what she said, Wang Dong was slightly stunned. Zhou Yi continued in a cold voice. What? Do you have any problems with this? Only then did Wang Dong sober up. He shook his head and said, I have none. Teacher Zhou, I'm willing to concede. Zhou Yi nodded and said, disperse. Take your set of chainmail with you. Tomorrow, another teacher will be having a class on theory with you all. I suggest that you meditate well as you digest the improvements and the significance of today's physical class. My next class will be in the afternoon, the day after next. At that time, I hope that I won't see any trash. Yes. The students all simultaneously agreed. However, they didn't randomly disperse afterwards. Instead, they collectively charged towards Huo Yuao and suddenly threw him into the sky. To these youths, excitement and happiness was something extremely straightforward. Because of Huo Yuao, nobody was eliminated, and they had even been able to avoid their punishment. Thus, at least during this moment, Huo Yuao was their hero. Furthermore, after the difficult and painful class, Teacher Zhou had found that miraculous plant-type soul sage to heal all of them and help them recover, which made them understand the strength of a high-ranked soul master. After the pain in their bodies had disappeared, their ill will towards Teacher Zhou had, imperceptibly, decreased by a large amount. The students continued to be rowdy for another 10 minutes or so, all the way until the students from other classes had finished their classes too. Only then did they stop and start heading back to their individual dorms to clean themselves up. Their current appearances were truly too haggard. The 91 students didn't know this, but it was precisely because of this lesson that a collective pride had begun to gradually appear within the 91 of them. It had only been a single day since the class had been established, and most of them still didn't know each other's names, but a collective sense of pride had already appeared. This was undoubtedly because of Teacher Zhou's teaching methods, combined with a certain amount of luck that Huo Yuao's performance at the end had brought. First year class 1 had managed to get a step ahead of the other classes. Huo Yuao and Wang Dong directly returned to their dorm whilst wearing their chainmail. They had to use the bathrooms at the two ends of the corridors, so Wang Dong let Huo Yuao clean up first, while he instead took a basin of water and cleaned himself up in the dorm room. At this moment, Huo Yuao's mind was still immersed in a special state of understanding towards the mysterious heaven technique. He didn't think much of it, and went to shower instead. However, the circulation of the mysterious heaven technique within his body hadn't stopped since he'd started circulating it in the new manner that he discovered. He discovered that the warm stream that had been unceasingly generated had already started to become weaker and weaker. Why? Is it because my physical strength has recovered? Huo Yuao was greatly puzzled. After he finished cleaning himself up, he faintly guessed the reason as to why it had happened. That warm feeling seemed to only appear when both his soul force and his body were nearly exhausted. And right now, since his body had already recovered by a large amount, and his soul force was also slowly recovering, that warm flow wouldn't be produced anymore. If I'd known earlier, it would have been better for me to not recover. Huo Yuao was somewhat helpless as he thought to himself. If that was the case, perhaps his passageways might have been able to obtain even more benefits. However, teacher left the chainmail for us. I can try it out by myself later. Once he thought of this, he couldn't help but feel excited. Huo Yuao. At this moment, a shout that woke him up from his excitement echoed out. Huo Yuao inwardly chastised himself. How could he have forgotten about her? He hurriedly shouted from the corridor, Teacher Xiaoya, I'll be right out. Then, he rapidly ran back to his dorm room, planning to put on his other school uniform before going out. Because he was in a rush, he didn't bother knocking on the door when he got there. He pushed the door open and entered, but when he entered, he was flabbergasted. What he saw was a white rear view. As Huo Yuao's gaze traced his round, narrow shoulders, the contours of a soft arc appeared by his waist. He had a pair of straight and thin legs which were more delicate than an ordinary person's. Due to his age, none of his features were exaggerated. However, his fair skin, which still had droplets of water dripping from it, appeared crystal clear. The assault to Huo Yuao's vision was simply too strong. AHH, a slightly scream echoed out. Following that, the patch of white in front of Huo Yuao's eyes became a patch of dazzling blue. A pair of enormous wings suddenly spread out, and what immediately followed that was a V-shape made of golden halos that suddenly brightened. The sapphire blue wings subsequently turned a bluish violet. A strong undulation of soul force immediately rushed out, as if it wanted to devour him. Fortunately, the wave-like soul force still stopped in the end. What are you doing? Why didn't you knock? Wang Dong's anger-filled voice echoed out. The blue light vanished, and when Huo Yuao looked again, he'd already put on a set of school clothes. He'd suddenly charged over, but hadn't made a move against Huo Yuao in the end. This was because Huo Yuao, who had just cleaned himself up, was only wearing his boxers now. His entire body was clean. However, when one compared the color of his skin to Wang Dong's, it wasn't just a difference of color. Huo Yuao's skin flickered with a healthy copper color, but it was far inferior to Wang Dong's enchanting white skin. Someone outside called for me. I was in a hurry. Sorry. Huo Yuao didn't know why, but his heartbeat had turned especially quick. He hurriedly ran to his bed and grabbed his clean school uniform before turning around and quickly running outside. Wang Dong stood there blankly, not stopping Huo Yuao. Only when Huo Yuao had shut the door and run off did he come back to his senses. Flashes of both red and white appeared on his face, but he didn't know what to do about it. After hurriedly running out of the dorm room, Huo Yuao's mind calmed down a bit. However, that white patch still lingered in his mind, especially those buttocks, which already stuck out a bit. What am I thinking about? Huo Yuao felt some self-disdain towards himself. He hurriedly shifted his thoughts towards the mysterious heaven technique. His ear suddenly hurt, and he let out a pained cry. Tang Ya's playful voice sounded out. You still know how to cry out. I've been waiting here for a long time. Huo Yuao miserably said, Teacher Xiaoya, please let go. We just had a physical class that made me sweat a lot, so wouldn't I first return to my dorm to clean up before I came? Only then did Tang Ya let go of him. As she looked at Huo Yuao's slightly pale face, her eyebrows furrowed. She said, Is that perverted Grandma Zhou you making things hard for you guys? You have to be a bit more careful, as she's always been widely known as an iron mask. You'll lose a layer of skin, if not die, if you offend her. How is it? Is your body still fine? If you're not fine, then so be it. We can talk tomorrow. Huo Yuao hurriedly shook his head and said, Teacher Xiaoya, I'm fine. Let's go. Today's physical training had brought him take one step closer to realizing that he needed nutrients, and a large amount of nutrients at that. That warm feeling created by the mysterious heaven technique had disappeared, but it caused an intense surge of hunger to rise up from his body. If he had no money, what could he buy to eat? Tang Ya giggled and said, Then you can roast 20 fish. I've prepared them for you. It won't take too much of your time, but it'll definitely take less than you working for the academy. Teacher Xiaoya, then where are we going to sell them? Huo Yuao asked. Clearly, Tang Ya had already thought about it thoroughly. At the academy's entrance. Our Shrek Academy's entrance is the eastern gate of Shrek City, and there's always been many peddlers outside. Furthermore, there's no lack of academy students who do business there. With your skill in roasting fish, we won't need to be afraid of not selling any if we go there. Even if we're unable to sell them, we can just eat them for ourselves. Huo Yuao followed Tang Ya all the way until they reached the gate. When they stepped outside, Huo Yuao was astonished. As of now, there were no longer any students here to enroll. Instead, both sides of the eastern gate's main road were swarming with peddlers. The peddlers were selling everything that could possibly be imagined, and their goods looked like glittering jewels. Out of the goods that were on display, the large variety of food was the greatest. Moreover, the sounds of hawkers doing their job never stopped. Clearly, the reason that they gathered here was for the sake of doing business with the students of Shrek Academy. Tang Ya was clearly slightly impatient. In an area that wasn't too far from the city gates, she took out the stuff that she prepared. She even took up a bit of the main road. She was clearly completely prepared. She had a metal grill that had been specially made by a smith, metal stands, various seasonings, as well as mackerels that had already been cleaned. She'd even brought a small table for the sake of setting all of her stuff down. As Huo Yuao helped her set up the grill, he couldn't help but find it funny. Teacher Xiaoya's resistance towards delicious food was really low. Tang Ya also took out the charcoal and put it on the floor before saying, Okay, my job is done. Everything else is up to you. I'm gonna go buy some other stuff to eat. Just remember that 2 of these fish are mine. Just sell them for 5 copper coins. In the future, if you want to buy ingredients, just find your canteens Auntie Lin. After saying this, she excitedly ran off. Huo Yuao checked the amount of ingredients that he had before he prepared the mackerels. The number of ingredients that he had was truly large, and Tang Ya was quite considerate. She'd even brought him some purple basil. Huo Yuao tore up the purple basil, noodle, then stirred it together with some of the other ingredients. After the ingredients were ready, he stuffed them into the belly of the mackerels, then used a bamboo stick to skewer them one by one. Today's physical class had made him understand many things, so he was anxious to go back and cultivate. Naturally, he didn't want to waste too much time here. Simply lighting a fire was as easy as a walk in the park for him. So after a moment's work, the oven already had a few bright red pieces of burning coal inside of it. The oven was quite big, and was able to hold 4 fish at once. Thus, he roasted the fish directly. It had to be said that Huo Yuao's level of skill with roasting fish was truly unrivaled. Not long after he'd started, a strong fragrance had already diffused outwards from his makeshift stall. This was better than any other form of advertisement, not even mentioning the students from the academy. Even the surrounding peddlers couldn't help but cast a few curious gazes at him. A male student who was wearing a yellow school uniform walked over and asked, "Little brother, how much are you selling these roasted fish for?" Huo Yuao answered with a very polite tone, "Senior, the roasted fishes are 5 copper coins each." That student was very straightforward. "It smells quite good. Let me try one." While he spoke, he handed 5 copper soul coins to Huo Yuao. This was Huo Yuao's first successful transaction, so he couldn't help but feel excited. After receiving the copper coins, he became even more serious while roasting the fish, so much so that he even roused some of the soul force he just recovered in order to use his spiritual detection to better control the heat. With the first customer, there would naturally be more people who come over. Only, this was the first time that Huo Yuao had appeared here. His fish smelled quite good, and nobody knew how they tasted. Practically all of the people who came over were students from Shrek Academy who'd just been dismissed for the day. When Huo Yuao passed the roasted mackerel over to the yellow-shirted student, everyone else couldn't help but look at him in expectation. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.